What happens when two superpowers clash? When titans collide, if you're thinking surely a great big flaming ball of awfulness, then congrats. You've unlocked the secret to historical inevitability, and we all know how inevitable this clash was just from looking at this map. So let's talk about it. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about the Punic Wars, the clashes between Rome and Carthage that shaped the ancient world. But if you want to see more videos where we take a critical look at some of history's most fascinating people and events, well, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we upload a new video. But without further ado, let's get into it. So, to understand the Punic Wars, we need to first set the stage. The Roman Republic. Rome was located in central Italy in a region known as Because of its central location, Rome had access to many different resources and a variety of trade partners. This gave them a huge head start against other Italian powers. Because of its geography, Italy itself was also divided into north, center, and south. Southern Italy was made up of independent Greek city-states, which meant Rome had to fight many wars to expand into those regions. This led to the conquest of the Italian peninsula and the formation of the Roman Republic. It would continue to grow through alliances, conquest, and marriage. Its political system was an oligarchy with power held by the aristocrats or patricians. They were advised by the Senate, and laws were made by assemblies open to adult male citizens. Magistrates or officials ran the government and commanded the military. Rome's military strength lay in its legions, groups of soldiers organized into smaller units called maniples. Their discipline and organization allowed them to be one of the most formidable militaries in the Mediterranean. The Carthaginian Empire. Carthaginian settlers who established it as a trading colony on the North African coast. Due to their maritime dominance, they controlled much of the Mediterranean. Their navy protected merchant ships that traveled the seas and brought wealth and power to the city. Politically, Carthage was an oligarchy run by a group of elite merchants. These wealthy families dominated politics and held most of the power. Like Rome, Carthage's military was mainly composed of hired soldiers known as mercenaries. While not as disciplined as the Romans, they were certainly fierce and determined. However, because they were mercenaries, they often fought for pay and weren't always loyal to their employers. Seeds of conflict. As both Carthage and Rome grew in power, they began competing for land around the Mediterranean. One area of contention was Sicily, an island off the coast of Italy. In 278 BCE, Carthage and Rome went to war after a dispute over the island of now known as Messina. Rome sided with the Greeks of southern Italy against Carthage's allies. The Romans won a small skirmish and soon became convinced that this victory marked the beginning of their empire's destiny for greatness. Now we're ready to dive into the Punic Wars themselves. The First Punic War took place from 264 to 241 BCE. Causes, as we saw in our setup, both powers were becoming increasingly interested in expanding their territory. The conflict over Sicily would eventually lead to war. The spark that started the war was the siege of the island of Messina by Carthage. Once again, Rome stepped in to help the Greeks who had been subjugated by Carthage. Key events and battles. Once Rome jumped into the fight, both navies went head-to-head in some major battles. At first, the Romans struggled because they were new to naval warfare and faced some tough defeats. But they didn't give up. They learned quickly and started copying Carthaginian ships to build their own fleet and sharpen their tactics. In the First Battle of Mylae in 260 BCE, Rome lost 100 ships, but they just kept on building more. Then came the big showdown at Ignomus, where Rome lost 70 ships but took out 90 Carthaginian ones. This really showed that Rome was getting the hang of things. Next, General Regulus led an invasion into Africa, winning battles, raiding cities, burning ships, and taking out thousands. He brought back a bunch of prisoners to Rome, but sadly, only 40 out of 2,000 made it back alive. Regulus was hailed as a hero until he returned with the terms of surrender. His rough treatment of the prisoners sparked outrage among the Romans. The Carthaginians executed him and sent his head to Rome as a warning. The longest and most crucial battle was the siege of The Romans couldn't block the port because they didn't have enough ships. So the Carthaginians used this to sneak in supplies. The city was tough to attack due to its strong defenses, leading to a long stalemate. The siege finally ended when the Romans built a road from their camp to the city walls, allowing them to bombard it nonstop. Eventually, Carthage agreed to peace talks and gave up Sicily and the western part of Sardinia to Rome. They also had to pay a hefty sum for the war. So it wasn't a huge loss for Carthage, but they didn't exactly win either. This war was a big deal because it marked the end of Phoenician control over the seas and kicked off Rome's rise as a major Mediterranean power. The tension between Rome and Carthage started here, setting the stage for a long, drawn-out conflict that would last for centuries. The Second Punic War took place from 280 to 201 BCEA. Hannibal Barca, the son of the great general Hannibal. Hannibal was a brilliant commander who hated Rome when his father died. He inherited command of the Carthaginian army and swore an oath to destroy Rome. Be the spark as part of the peace treaty ending the First Punic War. Rome controlled the Spanish coast and the Balearic Islands. The Carthaginians wanted this land back. However, Rome refused. Instead, they helped the Greek city of Saguntum resist Carthaginian advances. When Saguntum fell, Hannibal decided to invade Italy. See, Hannibal's invasion of Italy. Hannibal and his army crossed the Alps into northern Italy, defeating Roman forces at the battles of the Trebia and Lake His greatest victory came at the Battle of Cannae, where he trapped and slaughtered Roman troops despite being outnumbered. We can thank Polybius, a Greek historian from the time period, for the details of Hannibal's battle tactics. According to him, Hannibal's army consisted of infantry, cavalry, and war elephants. At Cannae, he placed his infantry in the center of his battle formation and hid his cavalry on the flanks. The plan was to lure the Romans into attacking his disciplined infantry. When the Romans broke through, Hannibal's cavalry would emerge and crush them. This is exactly what happened. According to Polybius, around 8,000 Romans were killed and only 5,000 managed to escape. Roman response. The Romans named Quintus Fabius Maximus Conctator the dictator, a position of great power and authority. His title, the delayer, was ironic since he hoped to avoid a full engagement with Hannibal. Instead, he wanted to harass his supply lines and slowly wear down his army. Many Romans felt this strategy was too slow and wanted to confront Hannibal directly. After 5 years of Fabian delay, the Senate finally agreed to stop the policy of procrastination. They chose Scipio Africanus to replace Fabius, and he led Rome to victory in the war. The war in Spain and Africa. While Hannibal was ravaging Italy, the Romans were fighting their own battles in Spain and Africa. In 211 BCE, Scipio invaded Spain to cut off Carthage's supply of mercenaries. He was successful and prevented Hannibal from receiving reinforcements. Soon after, he sailed to North Africa to invade Carthage's homeland. The Carthaginians were unable to stop him, and he marched on to Zama. After the Battle of Zama here, Scipio faced Hannibal one last time. According to Livy, the Romans formed their army into a crescent around the summit of a hill. This way, they were able to prevent Hannibal's cavalry from flanking them. Scipio also used light troops to disrupt the elephants and prevent them from charging. Hannibal tried his best, but in the end, his army was no match for the Roman discipline, and they fled. Hannibal retreated to the safety of Carthage, but he never forgot his oath to destroy Rome. Outcome and consequences. Carthage was forced to give up all of its war elephants and weapons. It also had to give up its overseas territories, pay an indemnity, and accept unfavorable peace terms. Rome's victory made it the undisputed master of the Western Mediterranean. It also ushered in a new era of cultural, economic, and political dominance for Rome. The Third Punic War took place from 149 to 146 BC. Causes: Carthage recovered from its defeat thanks to a favorable peace treaty. Rome, however, feared the growing power of Carthage and looked for reasons to destroy it once and for all. Cato the Elder, a Roman senator, constantly reminded the Roman Senate that Carthage must be destroyed. According to legend, He even ended many of his speeches with the phrase, Carthago delenda est Rome, found its pretext for war in North Africa. There were conflicts with neighboring Numidia, and Rome blamed Carthage for helping its former enemies. B. The Siege of Carthage. When war broke out, Rome immediately sent an army to besiege Carthage. The Romans used catapults to hurl boulders over the city walls. They also built towers to enable their soldiers to scale the walls. From inside the city, Hannibal's brother, Mago, and Hamilcar Barca's widow, a woman named Julia Misa, attempted to defend the city. But it was no use. The Carthaginians fought bravely, but the Romans were too powerful. The final assault on the city resulted in its capture and destruction. Legend has it that the Romans salted the earth to make it impossible for vegetation to grow ever again. The outcome and consequences: Carthage was completely destroyed and its people either killed or taken into slavery. Rome now controlled North Africa and was the undisputed mistress of the Mediterranean. So, to wrap this all up, let's talk about why the Punic Wars matter. They serve as a reminder that war is never a certainty. Although Rome won all 3 wars, each victory was hard-won. The Punic Wars solidified Rome's role as a global power while bringing about the end of Carthage. This also marks the end of our series on ancient civilizations. But don't worry, we'll still be covering plenty of ancient history. Just check out our video on the life of Alexander the Great. And with all that said, it's time to wrap up this episode. So I want to thank all of our supporters for their support. And if you want to be kept up to date on all of our latest videos, just make sure to subscribe and leave us a comment. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.